I was holding flowers when a hotel clerk called me by a name that wasn't mine. That's the moment my 10-year marriage ended. Not with a fight. Not with a confession. With a cheerful smile from a front desk clerk who had no idea she'd just detonated my entire life. Let me back up. My name is Daniel Carson. I'm a high school history teacher from Indianapolis. I drive a beat-up Subaru with a bumper sticker my wife bought me as a joke. I make dad jokes. I grade papers at the kitchen table on Friday nights. I am, by every definition, the boring one. My wife Sarah is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, ER physician, lifesaver, the most electric person I've ever known. She runs toward the chaos that everyone else runs from. I used to think that made us perfect together. She was the storm. I was the shelter. What I didn't know was that she'd been living 2 lives for 3 years. And I drove 6 hours straight into the middle of it. It started as a surprise. Our anniversary was coming up. Sarah was at a medical conference in Chicago, her 4th one that year. I'd been lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, thinking about the tan she came home with from Denver in February. The club music I heard in the background when I called her in Boston. The cologne on her jacket after Atlanta. A man's cologne. Not hers. I kept swallowing the doubt. Kept choosing trust over the quiet voice in my gut. That Friday night, I stopped listening to my head and listened to my gut instead. I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Grabbed the flowers I'd bought for our upcoming anniversary, picked up her favorite chocolates, and programmed the Chicago Hilton into my GPS 6 hours. I could be there by afternoon. I told myself it was romantic. Spontaneous. The kind of grand gesture that makes a marriage feel alive again. I was lying to myself. I needed to know the truth. The Hilton lobby was massive. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. And right there on the ballroom level, signs for the Midwest Trauma Medicine Symposium. The conference was real. I actually felt ashamed of myself. What was I doing here? I almost turned around. Instead, I walked to the front desk, flowers in hand, feeling like an idiot. My wife is staying here for the conference, I said. I wanted to surprise her. Could you tell me what room she's in? She might be registered under Sarah Mitchell or Sarah Carson. The clerk typed. Frowned. Typed again. I'm not seeing either of those names, sir. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? Oh, wait. She smiled. Here we go. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Room 812. Checked in yesterday. Would you like me to call up? The lobby tilted. Johnson. I'm sorry, what name? Johnson, she repeated, still smiling. Is there a problem? My wife's maiden name is Mitchell. My name is Carson. We have no connection to anyone named Johnson. No, I heard myself say. No problem. Don't call. I'll surprise her. She handed me a key card with a smile. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Johnson. I stood in that elevator holding the key card like it was a grenade. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. My hands were shaking by the time the doors opened on the 8th floor. I walked down the long hallway toward room 812 like a man walking toward something he can't unsee. I stood outside the door and listened. Voices inside. Laughter. A man's voice, deep, relaxed, comfortable. Then hers. We should order room service. I don't want to leave this room all weekend. Her laugh. That laugh I fell in love with. I slid the key card into the lock. The light turned green. I pushed the door open. The room was beautiful. King bed. City view. Robes laid out on crisp white sheets. And sitting on that bed, cross-legged in one of those robes, laughing at something on a phone, was my wife. Next to her, also in a robe, was a man I had never seen in my life. Mid-40s, tall, salt and pepper hair. They looked up when the door opened. I watched 5 emotions cross Sarah's face in 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and something I'd never seen directed at me before. Guilt. Daniel. The man looked at her, then at me. Who's Daniel? I'm her husband, I said. The color drained from his face. Her what? His name was Richard Johnson. He'd met Sarah 3 years ago. At a conference. In Chicago. She had told him she was divorced. That she'd kept her ex-husband's name professionally. That she was free. He had believed her. Because why wouldn't he? The same reason I believed her when she said these were work trips. We were both fools. Just different kinds. You told me you were divorced, Richard said to her, his voice rising. I introduced you to my daughter. We talked about moving in together. Moving in. I looked at Sarah. You were going to leave. She couldn't look at either of us. I hadn't decided. 10 years of marriage. Our house. The kids we'd talked about having. And she hadn't decided. Richard was already getting dressed. Jeans. T-shirt. Shoes. Where are you going? Sarah asked. Away from you. He grabbed his wallet. I don't know who you are. He walked past me to the door, stopped. Turned back. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I didn't know she was married. If I had. I know, I said. I can tell. He nodded once. The door clicked shut behind him. And then it was just the two of us. Why? I asked. She wiped her eyes. Took a long breath. You're a good man, Daniel. You're kind. You're steady. You're safe. But I'm not. She looked up at me. I'm chaos. And you're so patient. So calm. She paused. So boring. There it was. Not in anger. Not even cruelly. Just honest, finally, for the first time in years. Boring. I drove 6 hours to surprise you, I said. I bought your favorite chocolates. I made a reservation at Spaya, where we had our first date. I had a speech written in my phone about being ready to start a family with you. I set the flowers down on the dresser. I was going to ask you to start trying for kids tonight. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry. Don't. I picked up my bag. I've been waiting 10 years for you to love me the way I love you. I'm done waiting. I do love you. You love the safety of me, I said. That's not the same thing. She started to argue. Then stopped. Because we both knew it was true. I drove home in the dark. 6 hours, no radio, no podcasts, just highway lights and silence and the slow, quiet collapse of everything I thought my life was. I thought about every conference. Every city. Every time she came home with conference badges and pharmaceutical tote bags and stories that all checked out perfectly. How long had she been this good at lying? I pulled into our driveway at 2 a.m., walked into our house. Sat on the couch in the dark. And for the first time since I was a kid, I cried. The divorce took 4 months. We sold the house, split everything down the middle. No drama, no alimony, no drawn-out war, just two people legally untangling a decade. The day the papers were finalized, I sat in my new one-bedroom apartment and felt nothing. Not relief, not grief. Just empty. Like a room where all the furniture has been moved out and the walls still have the nail holes. 6 months later, I ran into Richard at a coffee shop in downtown Indy. We talked for 20 minutes. Turned out he was a decent guy. Just another person she'd used and discarded. I wasted 3 years on her, he said. I wasted 10, I replied. We shook hands and went our separate ways. Two strangers united by the same lie. A year after that, I met Emily. She teaches English at my school. Divorced. Loves hiking and terrible reality TV. She knew about Sarah. I told her everything up front. That's awful, she said. I'm sorry. It's in the past. Is it? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Getting there. She smiled. Good. Because I like you, Daniel Carson. And I don't want to compete with a ghost. You won't, I said. I meant it. 2 years after the divorce, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah. I know you don't want to hear from me. But I need you to know I'm sorry. You deserved better. I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not out of bitterness. Not out of spite. Just because I didn't need it anymore. People ask me sometimes if I regret making that drive. If I wish I'd stayed home. Stayed ignorant. Stayed comfortable in the beautiful lie. I don't. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know then: the worst day of your life and the first day of your real life can be the exact same day. I drove 6 hours to surprise my wife. She surprised me instead. And it saved me. If this story hit home, if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted completely, drop "survived" in the comments. You're not alone.